Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And on this segment of the show, I have family law attorney Sandro Tuzzo, CEO of Separate Us from Oakland, California. Now, Sandro has a wealth of experience in the area of family law and will be talking to you today about the important topic of selecting the way you approach your divorce before anything gets filed with the court. Now, that sounds like a very interesting topic, and I can't wait to bring him on the show. So, if you are one of the many divorcing couples in the California area, it might be a good idea to take a break, log out of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything else which may cause a distraction. Grab yourself a notepad and pen so you can take some notes and listen in to what Sandro has to share with you today. So with that said, let's not keep him waiting any longer. Welcome to the show, Sandro.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Okay, Sandro, we've got about 20 minutes, so let's jump straight in and make the best use of the time that we do have. Briefly, in your own words, can you describe the kinds of people you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help?
Sure. Well, so the types of people I serve are generally people that are realizing that they need to move forward with the divorce process. They've probably been struggling with whether or not the relationship is really over, and now they're trying to understand how the legal process works. So what we generally find is that people don't really have a clue where to begin, that the legal process is a giant mystery, and they really need help primarily just navigating through before they even get to trying to make the decisions about who's going to get what or how the divorce agreement's going to go. So generally, I interact with people a lot that are at the beginning of engaging with the legal system, and this may be their first time that they've really had to deal with court, and they don't really know where to start.
Okay, so keeping in mind that anything you do share with us today, Sandro, is not legal advice or legal assistance, and I'm pretty sure that there are many. However, what's the most common misconception you come across while you're out there helping the people who you love to help the most?
Well, one of the most common misconceptions is that people think that the divorce process goes very quickly and that they need to know exactly how the divorce is going to end up at the beginning. They're eager to get finality and to move on and figure out how the divorce agreement is going to be structured. And it's really just not possible. Most states, California, which is where I work, it takes at least 6 months to go from beginning to end of your divorce, and that's best case scenario. So what's challenging is to make sure people understand that it's going to take a little while, even if they have everything sorted out, at least preliminarily.
Right. So with that in mind then, Sandro, and obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, please share with us an example of how you've helped somebody who came to you with those challenges or with that misconception that you just described, and what kind of results or what kind of transformational results you were able to gain for them.
Sure. Well, so we had a customer come in, and he had a lot of ideas about what his divorce was going to result in, how the agreement was going to be structured, who was going to get what. He even had calculations for spousal support, and all of that was really just too early. And so we helped him kind of slow down and move through the process step by step, and then by doing that, time had its course, and he was able to discover that him and his wife had a lot more in common about certain areas that they thought they were in disagreement on than he had thought. So actually, the process was a bit smoother than he had anticipated. It just took longer, and it wasn't exactly the divorce agreement he had envisioned, although it ended up working pretty well. So it really just kind of helped him move through the process at a slower pace, rather than having him kind of come to the table with a whole structure about how it was all going to go down. Because, well, frankly, he'd never been divorced before. He didn't really know how the divorce was going to end up. But I think there's a certain anxiety to feel a sense of predictability to things at the beginning, when it's just frankly not possible.
Okay, so today, as a reminder, we are talking about selecting the way that you approach your divorce before anything gets filed with the court. Now, with that in mind, Sandro, and for those divorcing couples who are listening right now and wanting to know more, what's the most common but unknown pitfall that you'd like them to be aware of, regardless of how they feel or regardless of what situation they find themselves in? What's the most common pitfall out there, Sandro?
I think there's a lot of common pitfalls, but one that's pretty salient in my mind is when people seek the assistance of an attorney right from the get-go and sort of announce their intention to get a divorce through their lawyer. And what you end up seeing with that is it sends this very aggressive tone to your spouse right at the beginning. And it communicates really two things. Number one, it communicates that they're kind of drawing their guns, or could at least, right? That they're there to fight. And the other thing it does, which is pretty subtle, but it's pretty powerful, is that it sends a message that you don't really trust your spouse to hear the news from you directly. And so you have a stranger deliver it to you. And that really plants a bad seed from the get-go, and it's really hard to ratchet that back when you start out with such a strong and really unwelcomed communication. And so what I really encourage people to do is, at the beginning of the case, even if you do lawyer up, sit down with them or have a call, but talk to them directly and explain what is going to happen, and that you've decided to move forward, and that you're going to file papers, and that they're going to have to get delivered, and have it come from your mouth. And so they know that they're hearing it from you, and they're not going to be as surprised. And then ideally, consistent with the advice that I'm giving for this episode, you talk to them about how you're going to proceed, or how you guys both are going to try to move forward. Are we both going to get lawyers? Should we try a mediator? Should we try an online platform? What should we do? We talk about it together. That really plants some seeds of collaboration that are hard to do after you've started out pretty heavy with a lawyer intervening at the beginning.
Well, certainly is no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
That's correct.
So tell me, Sandra, how long have you been a family attorney?
It's about 15 years.
And in that time then, Sandra, you've obviously helped hundreds of people within that period of time. Is this something that you still enjoy? Do you still feel really passionate about this when you wake up in the morning at 5, 6 a.m. and you've got a full day ahead of you helping these divorcing couples?
Yes and no. I mean, when I was practicing as an attorney full-time, there were certainly days that were harder than others because you're helping people through a really tough time in their life, arguably their worst. But what really invigorates me these days is that I'm working a lot with people who would not otherwise think that they can afford an attorney. And in California, at least, that constitutes about 60 to 80% of people getting a divorce. And I'm doing that because I started essentially a TurboTax type process for people to fill out their court forms. And this empowers people to to do their own paperwork and then bring in a lawyer or a mediator or a financial advisor when they realize they need additional help. But it really gives them the tools to do a lot on their own, and it's much cheaper, and it empowers them to kind of move on to the next step of their life, which is really the point. You want to help people move to the next stage of their life, and so that's really what excites me now. Is I'm really doing that with this new product.
Right. So in terms of your background, you just touched a little bit on that then, and you mentioned your TurboTax process, and I'm sure you can expand just a little bit on that in a short moment. But for the listeners out there, could you just share a little bit about your background and your education? You've already said you're a family law attorney of 15 years, so I'm sure there are some qualifications that you've had for that and putting some really hard work. So just share a little bit about your background, your education, and your experience as it relates to the topic of family law.
Sure. So education-wise, I went to undergrad and majored in psychology with a minor in rhetoric, and then I went to law school, and then I got certified as a mediator. So I mediate family law disputes as well as litigate them. And personally, I've kind of experienced divorce for better or for worse from all angles. My parents separated a bunch when I was a child, and so when I was a teenager, I was essentially a default mediator. And then I got married and divorced relatively young, so I did my own divorce, and it was relatively amicable. But I saw what it was like from a client side, and to top it all off, I'm a divorce lawyer, so I've kind of experienced it from all angles. So I feel like I have a pretty holistic experience going into practicing this.
And so how does all that link with what you mentioned before, the TurboTax process, if I've got that correct?
Sure. So what we're seeing is a lot of areas of the service industry, consumer, retail, now even medical, a lot of it is going online, and there's a lot of powerful tools. I mean, heck, if you want to date, right, you can go online and there's plenty of options. But if you want to split up and end a marriage, there's not a lot of online tools. There's not a lot of technology. So if you look at an analogous area, you look at taxes, filling out tax forms. It's the same thing as a divorce in many ways. You have to go and fill out government forms that are available, that are hard to find and hard to understand. So TurboTax took care of that by giving a nice, clean interface, one question at a time, and then they take your documents, they file it for you, and they connect you with CPAs if needed. And so that's exactly what we've built, but for divorce forms.
Right. Okay, and does this have a name or a brand, or is it called TurboTax
yes,
or something else?
It very much does. It very much does. The company's called Separate Us.
Okay.
So it's the website is separate.us.
Okay, so Sandro, just for a moment, I'd like you to picture the kinds of divorcing couples who reach out to you for your help, and they're wanting to know more about today's topic, selecting the way that you approach your divorce before anything gets filed with the court. Now, with that picture in mind, Sandro, what final thoughts would you like to impart before we close out with our last question for today?
Sure, I'll keep it simple. Be patient. It's a long process, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
So if there is somebody out there who feels they want to know more at this stage, how would they find you? Where would they get in contact with you, Sandro?
They would go to my website, and they would start up a chat or send us an email through there, and we'll be able to get back to them pretty much right away.
Okay, can you just mention that website one more time and your email address?
Sure. It's separate.us, and my email address is sandro@separate.us.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sandro. I know we've got a short amount of time, but you've managed to pack in a lot of great insight. So thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today. You certainly have demonstrated that you're a true educator and advocate for your client success. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome also, Sandro. And you know something, I'd also like to say an even bigger thank you to the listener, the unfortunate divorcing couples out there in the Oakland, California area. Thank you for joining us on this very insightful discussion with one of the leading family law attorneys. Remember his name, it's Sandro Tuzzo. Make sure you do check him out, give him a call, send him an email, visit his website. I'm sure you're going to be in the right place. So again, I'm Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.